She spilled juice on a stranger in the elevator, then found out he was her boss. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. It was 6:47 a.m. when Claire Bennett entered through the service entrance of the Whitmore Grand, a five-star hotel located near Madison Avenue, a discreet hub for high-profile guests, visiting diplomats, and meetings that never make the headlines. The sidewalks were still damp from the early morning rain, the sky was overcast, and the cold air turned every breath into a visible puff of steam. In the staff locker room, she tied up her hair, checked her light makeup, adjusted the scarf of her uniform, and clipped on her badge securely. Her shift officially started at 7, but she always liked heading up early to prepare the welcome kits for the first executive guests of the day. She carried 2 stacked boxes, one with amenities, the other with personalized welcome sets. On top, balanced a plastic cup filled with freshly squeezed orange juice, which she had grabbed from the staff kitchen on her way up. When the elevator stopped on the 5th floor, a man stepped in hurriedly, still on the phone, dark leather folder tucked under one arm, and a quick hand gesture signaling she didn't need to push any buttons. She tried to adjust her grip on the boxes, but in the process, the juice tipped and spilled directly onto his crisp white shirt. The liquid spread quickly, soaking the collar down to his waistline. She blurted out an apology, set the boxes down, and pulled a tissue from the pocket of her apron. "Sir, it was my fault. Let me help clean it." She was crouched when she looked up. His face was angular, his hair still damp like he had just stepped out of the shower, and his clear eyes met hers with a calm that suggested control, not annoyance. He ended the call with a tap and let her press the tissue gently against the wet fabric. "I can arrange to have this cleaned if you tell me what room you're staying in." He shook his head without stepping back. "No need," he replied in a low, clear voice, tinged with a soft northern accent. "It's just a shirt." There was no impatience, but there wasn't any rehearsed kindness either, just a simple statement. When the elevator door opened on the 8th floor, he stepped out without introducing himself. She continued to the 7th, her fingers still cold and her face flushed. She didn't tell anyone what had happened. She simply returned to the front desk, updated the check-in schedule, and went on with her day. At exactly 9 o'clock, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted. The management team positioned themselves in the main hall. The new general manager of the Westbrook Hospitality Group was making his first official visit to the hotel that morning. When he walked through the automatic glass doors, in a dark suit and neutral expression, Claire recognized him instantly. It was the same man from the elevator. No internal memo had included updated photos. He walked with quiet confidence, not rushing, accompanied by 2 assistants. He stopped in front of the front desk, looked directly at her, and said in a steady voice, "Looks like we started the day together." The sentence could have sounded like a tease, but the way he said it made it clear it wasn't. Her co-workers glanced at one another. Claire held his gaze, maintaining her posture. "New shirt, sir, and I promise no more accidents today." He extended his hand. "Julian Westbrook, general manager, but today, just an accidental elevator companion." She shook his hand firmly. "Claire Bennett, VIP guest services, and apparently responsible for making the elevators more interesting." He held her hand a moment longer than necessary, then stepped back. "We'll continue later," and walked away. Neither of them smiled too much, but the look they exchanged said plenty. The shirt incident hadn't caused embarrassment. It had left a mark, and now she was part of Julian Westbrook's first day at the Whitmore Grand in a way that neither of them could erase. The atmosphere inside the Whitmore Grand shifted noticeably within the first 24 hours of Julian Westbrook's arrival. Long-time employees spoke in hushed tones about the new way he moved through the halls, the quiet recalibrations in housekeeping protocols, and how schedules were now being restructured with greater precision. The front desk felt it first. Requests started arriving earlier, with detailed instructions and strict timelines. What used to be corrected gently was now anticipated with accuracy. Claire, however, showed no signs of discomfort. If anything, she adapted with such fluidity that it caught people's attention. During the daily supervisors' meetings, her name began surfacing more often, cited as a model of quick response, clear communication, and poised interaction with high-profile guests. Nothing visible in her external routine had changed, but inside, it was clear something about her was being noticed more, and not just by her colleagues. Julian seemed to be watching her more often too. He never said anything, no compliments, no suggestive remarks, but every time she walked into a room to deliver a file, refresh a tray, or relay a message, his eyes followed her just a few seconds longer than necessary. That Thursday, Claire was asked to bring welcome materials for a visiting Swiss corporate group to a conference room on the 4th floor. The event coordinator was running late, and since the front desk had prepped everything ahead of time, she brought it up herself. When she entered the glass-walled room, Julian was alone, standing in front of a projected screen filled with charts and supplier names. Seated at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, no jacket, his expression was as focused as it had been that first morning. She placed the folders on a side table, adjusted one of the trays, and was about to leave when he spoke, eyes still on the screen. The juice, it was orange, no ice. She paused near the door. It was, fresh squeezed from the kitchen, one of the few things worth keeping from the last management. He slowly turned his head, carefully picking up on how she chose her words. That's true. And your uniform was blue, wasn't it? Blue is for lobby service. Today I'm assigned to the executive floor, hence gray. Julian leaned back in his chair and rubbed his jaw as though analyzing not just her words, but her cadence. You understand flow, place the trays at the right height, kept all paths clear, and you maintain eye contact. How long have you been working here? Almost 5 years. I started as an intern, worked my way through different departments. Ever thought about leaving? A few times, but somehow the hotel always pulls me back. And now, with the change in leadership, I figured I'd wait. He closed the laptop and nodded toward a chair. Sit for a minute. This isn't an interrogation, just curiosity. The way he said it wasn't casual, but it wasn't stiff either. She sat with composure, her back straight, hands resting in her lap. Is there something else you'd like to ask? I want to know if you plan to stay, or if you're just waiting for something better to come along. Depends on what happens in the next few weeks. If the environment holds up, if the team feels respected, if there's room to grow, I'll stay. So you're negotiating. I'm being honest. I figured you'd value that. He studied her for a few more seconds. There was less hardness in his eyes than when they'd first met. Still, no artificial charm. It felt more like he was measuring how well she could hold her ground. When she stood to leave, he remained silent, returning his focus to the charts. But before she reached the door, he spoke again. You'll be overseeing the Swiss group's service. I want someone reliable in those corridors. I can coordinate with the supervisor. No, I want it to be you. Let her know. I'll handle the rest. That night, Claire stayed late to complete the internal forms for the wing she would now manage during the international visit. She stopped by the break room for a glass of water, and when she opened the locker where she kept her things, she found a thin envelope with her name handwritten on it. No signature, just a single line on company stationery. Don't let the grey floor swallow you. You work better in color. She held the note for a few seconds before folding it and tucking it into her coat pocket. She didn't mention it to anyone, but when she walked home that night, the fatigue she carried wasn't just from the long day. It was something else. Focused, clear, and surprisingly welcome. The arrival of the Swiss delegation completely shifted the pace inside the Whitmore Grand. From early morning, Claire moved swiftly through the hallways with a clipboard in hand, a two-way radio clipped to her waistband, and a stack of notes held together with colorful paper clips. 8 executives, 3 partners, 1 interpreter, and 2 drivers. 4 presidential suites, 5 conference rooms booked at different times, and a welcome dinner scheduled for that evening. The floral arrangements had to match the white and green color scheme. Water bottles needed gold caps, and the key card envelopes had to display full names with the proper accents, an explicit requirement from one of the assistants who had arrived the day before. At 9:15 a.m., just as Claire was handing off the final confirmations at the front desk, she received a message from the 3rd floor. Julian Westbrook wanted to see her. No reason given, just a time and the note that it would be brief. She arrived precisely on time. When she knocked on the door of the temporary office he was using, she found the room flooded with natural light, curtains drawn open, the desk nearly empty, as if he needed no more than that to run everything under his command. He didn't offer her a seat. He simply motioned for her to step in and pointed at his laptop screen. The group asked to move tomorrow's dinner to 7:30 instead of 8. Can you confirm if that messes with anything in the kitchen? It does, but it's manageable. I'll speak directly with the chef. Do it personally. Some requests can't be filtered through anyone else. She gave a small nod. Anything else? Yes. I need you to join me at the welcome dinner tonight. You want me in the dining room? At the table, as part of the coordination team. I've never been part of an executive event like that. I'm not in sales. Exactly. You're not there to sell. You're there to represent. His tone wasn't soft, but it didn't demand obedience either. It was more like he was laying out a protocol that hadn't yet made it into the staff handbook. She took a few seconds before responding. If management approves, I'll attend. It's already approved. The dress code is formal. I'll send the details by email. And please, no uniform. Wear something of your own, something that reflects who you are. He didn't wait for further comment. He turned back to his screen. Claire walked out with a straight spine, her steps composed, her stomach tight with something that wasn't fear, but something close. For the rest of the day, she handled every task with precision, checked on the flowers, reconfirmed room setups, made last-minute adjustments. She arrived home at 5 p.m. with sore feet and a cluttered mind. Staring at her closet, she hesitated for a moment before choosing a teal dress, simple, straight cut, one she'd worn only once before at her older sister's birthday. It wasn't flashy, but it also didn't resemble anything she would wear while on duty. She tied her hair in a low bun, applied light makeup, and chose a pair of delicate earrings her grandmother had passed down to her. Claire arrived at the hotel 20 minutes early, as usual. The receptionist recognized her instantly, but didn't say a word. A security guard led her up to the mezzanine, where the dinner was being held. The guests were already gathered, glasses of sparkling wine in hand. Julian stood at the head of the main table, deep in conversation with one of them. The moment he saw her, he paused, gave a subtle nod, and gestured toward the empty seat beside him. She joined him quietly, and he resumed speaking as if her presence had always been expected. Dinner was served in 3 courses, chilled appetizer, a main dish, and a light dessert. Claire held her composure, listened attentively, responded when necessary, and gradually realized she was being noticed, even without saying much. Julian never called attention to her, but twice during the evening, he made a point of acknowledging the internal team's work and how important coordinated service was. When his eyes landed on her, they didn't seek approval. They simply seemed to check if she remained grounded, even in unfamiliar territory. At the end of the evening, As the guests made their way to the bar, Claire collected the folded napkins from each plate and handed them off to an assistant. She was about to exit through the side stairs when she felt Julian lightly touch her arm. "Did you feel comfortable?" he asked. "I still prefer the background," she replied naturally. "But you handled it well." It was part of the job. He let her go without saying another word. She smoothed the fabric of her dress and walked toward the stairwell. Julian watched her go, calm, upright, eyes forward. Her presence in that dining room had been noticed and accepted, and he didn't pretend not to see it. Saturday morning broke overcast, with a sharp wind sweeping through the streets of New York City's Upper West Side. Claire was awake by 6, just like any other workday, even though she wasn't scheduled. She was officially off, following 5 intense days of non-stop logistics for the visiting Swiss executives. Her shift manager had assured her there was no need to report in before Monday, but her mind hadn't gotten the message. She made herself a slow breakfast, sorted laundry, and tried to get through a hospitality trends report she'd been avoiding for weeks. Around 9, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, but the name at the bottom left no doubt. Julian. "Got plans at 11? Nothing formal. Just an idea. If you're up for it, meet me here." A location followed. No pressure, no explanation. Just an invitation. She stared at the screen for a moment, replied that she'd be there, and set the phone down before heading to the bedroom. No rush, but she didn't take long either. A fitted turtleneck, ivory coat, dark jeans, and leather boots. No heavy makeup, no sweet perfume. Just small stud earrings, and her hair pinned back with a simple clip. At 10:52, she was on the corner he'd marked. The building had an older brick facade, tall windows and open curtains. He appeared at the gate without a blazer, wearing just a light linen shirt and a grey jacket slung casually over his shoulders. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I still don't know what I came for. Honestly, I'm not sure either. I just needed to get out of the hotel, and you felt like the right person to call." She raised an eyebrow silently. He pushed the gate open. "There's an old book fair in the park today, just 5 minutes from here. If you've got nothing better, come along. I promise not to mention spreadsheets." The walk was short. The sidewalks were still slick from the previous night's drizzle, and the park's metal booths were slowly coming to life. Vendors were spreading blankets over their tables and laying out leather-bound volumes with embossed spines. Julian walked beside her without trying to control the pace. He asked simple questions and actually listened. He wanted to know where she had studied, what she liked to read, why she chose hospitality. She answered naturally, telling him about her grandmother who used to take her to high tea in Manhattan and said you could learn more by watching the waiters than from any classroom. He mentioned he was born in Boston but found his rhythm only after moving to New York. They stopped at a booth that sold vintage postcards. Claire picked one with a watercolor of Brooklyn Heights. "I'd live here," she said, "even knowing the neighborhood wakes up to tourists snapping photos." "Exactly because of that. Someone has to live where others dream of vacationing." He chuckled but didn't respond. He paid for the postcard, handed it to her, and kept walking. They sat on a wooden bench beside the park's central fountain. Kids ran by, women in long coats chatted by the path, and tourists adjusted their camera lenses. Julian leaned back, crossed his arms, and watched the flow of people for a while. "I don't usually do this. Ask co-workers to hang out on a Saturday." "I didn't think you did. But I figured you'd understand, without making it a problem. And you did. If I thought it was a game, I wouldn't have come." He turned to her. "So, what do you think it is?" "I'm not sure yet. But if it stays like this, maybe it's just a walk. And that's already more than most things." He looked forward again, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. She noticed, but didn't say anything. They stayed there a little longer, watching the movement around the park. Then they strolled back toward his building. At the gate, he held it open for a second like he wasn't ready to end it. "Thanks for today." "Thank you. That book fair was better than any alignment meeting." He lightly touched her arm. The gesture wasn't calculated or dragged out, just long enough for her to feel it meant something more than politeness. "I still don't fully know how your mind works, but I'd like to." She gave a short smile and looked away. "Take your time." She stepped back, already turning to leave. As she walked down the sidewalk, she pulled her coat tighter around her and slipped the postcard into her bag with care. The street was quiet. At the next intersection, she paused before crossing. His name popped into her mind without warning. She waited a few extra seconds, then crossed. Monday began with a light rain and a long list of tasks at the Whitmore Grand. The front desk team had split into 2 shifts to make up for the weekend gaps, and department managers exchanged instructions in the lobby with the weary pace of people running on little sleep. Claire arrived 15 minutes early, as usual. Her hair was pinned in a tighter bun than usual, her light grey uniform pressed, her steps composed, even though her mind was already calculating the timing between one delivery and the next. The Swiss group had checked out Sunday morning, but the week's agenda was still packed. 9:30 a.m. meant a finance department meeting, 11 a vendor walkthrough, and 2 p.m. the launch of the new partnership with the coffee chain supplying the executive lounge. The pace had returned to normal, but something was different. From the moment she arrived, Claire could tell Julian's name was still echoing through the halls. Some called him demanding, others precise. A few just said, "He knows exactly where he's walking." And she had seen that up close. At 10:20, she was called via radio to report to the 3rd floor conference room. No reason given, just a quick message. She grabbed the logistics clipboard and entered after 2 knocks. Julian was standing near the screen, speaking with 2 contract coordinators. He didn't look at her right away, only motioned to a seat near the back. When he finished, he nodded at the others and waited until the room was clear. "I need the vendor data updated by the end of the day. There are discrepancies in 3 suppliers' deliveries. Can you handle it alone?" "Yes." "Use the report saved in the system folder. Ignore the spreadsheet's original attachments. They're outdated." Got it." He stepped away from the screen, ran a hand through his hair, and leaned against the table edge. "How was your Sunday?" "Rainy, but quiet. Did you think about anything you wanted to say after Saturday?" The tone wasn't pointed, but it left no room for misinterpretation. She held his gaze. "I thought it was good to get out of the hotel, and that I didn't expect to do that with you. You don't have to call me sir outside meetings." "All right. It was good for me, too." She was ready to thank him and leave, but he didn't wrap up. He took a step toward her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to make the space between them feel intentional. "I'm having lunch out today. A small place, a few minutes from here. It's nice. If you're free, join me." She didn't answer right away. "Are you waiting for me to ask if it's a personal invitation?" "No, I already know it is." And I need to check my schedule." "No pressure, just an offer." "I understand." He smiled faintly and stepped back. "I'll leave at 12:40. If you decide to come, I'll be in the staff lot. If not, I'll go alone." The room fell quiet again. She left, clipboard in hand, gaze steady. In the hallway, she stopped by the window overlooking the side street, watched the cars roll by for a moment, resetting her mental clock, then headed downstairs. She updated the spreadsheet, replied to 2 emails, and informed her supervisor she'd be stepping out for part of her break. At 12:30, she passed through the lobby unnoticed. The director's lot was tucked behind the building, accessible by a restricted internal stairwell. When she arrived, he was already in the car, driver's seat pulled back, radio off. Seeing her, he opened the passenger door without a word. The restaurant was on a narrow street with a red awning and an understated nameplate. Inside, just 5 tables, an unlit fireplace, and a faint rosemary aroma drifting from the open kitchen. No formalities passed between them. The waiter handed over the daily specials. She picked one without much reading. During the meal, they talked about music, weekend trips, cities that feel like winter. He mentioned how he used to rent a cabin with his brother in January, but hadn't done that in a while. She said she preferred flat cities with corner cafes and Saturday markets. Neither mentioned work, neither said the hotel's name. When the check came, he paid without ceremony. She thanked him. On the drive back, the car slipped through quieter streets. When they arrived, he parked, turned off the engine, and stared ahead for a moment. "I don't do this often. That's okay. But I'm trying." She looked at him with focus, then stepped out without a reply. Light rain had started again. Her coat was zipped to the top, her steps steady toward the staff entrance. There were no guarantees, but something new was starting to take shape. Wednesday began on a quieter note at the Whitmore Grand. Most of the week's events were clustered toward the weekend, and the early hours were spent ironing out small details. Claire had resumed her regular shifts and, just like the days before, moved through the floors with poise, showing only the discipline expected of someone in her role. But something in her had changed. Her co-workers noticed her sharper focus, the way she absorbed instructions without distraction, and how she seemed unaffected by the ambient noise of a busy hotel. Nothing had been formally acknowledged, no lines crossed, yet whispers were already circling about how often the general manager personally assigned tasks to her. Inside, Claire didn't label what she was feeling. There was no title, no clear definition, but she couldn't ignore how her attention sharpened each time Julian's name appeared on an internal message. Nor could she shake the image of him turning off the car engine on Monday, sitting in silence for a few beats, as if everything that came next hinged on a kind of courage still forming in real time. That evening, Claire's shift ended at 9 p.m. She dropped off the signed daily log at the front desk and was on her way to the locker room when an emergency intercom buzzed from the 4th floor housekeeping office. A guest had reported a lighting issue and no other staff was currently available. Though technically off duty, Claire decided to go. She retrieved a backup flashlight from the service area and made her way to the room, a rarely used guest suite typically reserved for traveling partners. The hallway was dim, but the room light was on. She knocked gently. "Come in, it's open." She turned the knob carefully. Julian was by the window, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, staring out at the city lights. A folder lay open on the desk beside him. "I heard there was a power issue." "There was. It was resolved before you got here." She exhaled slowly. "Then I didn't need to come up. I knew you'd come anyway." She shut the door and stood still for a moment. Whatever was between them now was no longer just professional. No tasks, no reports, no pending requests. He moved toward the desk, picked up a glass of water, took a sip, then set it down and looked at her. "I know this might not be the right time, maybe not the right place either, but if I wait any longer, I'll miss the moment." "The moment for what?" He stepped closer, stopping just in front of her. "To tell you that you've been on my mind long enough that I can't pretend this will just pass." "And what is it that you want?" "I want to see you outside the hotel. No clocks, no boundaries. We've already been out." "Not like that." She didn't step back. She didn't answer immediately either. But something shifted in her expression. He saw it. She brushed her sleeve lightly, as if grounding herself. but she didn't need anything to lean on. She was already steady. "And if I'm interested too." He didn't speak. He leaned in. The kiss wasn't rushed or impulsive. It was measured, matched to the pace they'd taken to reach that point. His hands found her waist gently. Her body answered, no withdrawal. When they pulled apart, neither of them smiled, but their eyes told a different story. "I'm not staying," she said. "Not tonight." "Why not?" "Because it's still early, and if I stay now, you might think that's all this was." He didn't try to change her mind, just nodded. "Then let me see you outside here again." "You will." She left with purposeful steps. She didn't look back. Her phone buzzed with a random notification in her pocket, but that wasn't what mattered. She went home with the quiet certainty that something real had just begun. Friday morning started with a surge of activity at the Whitmore Grand. An American corporate group had reserved half of the 5th floor, and the housekeeping teams split into shifts to keep up with their meeting schedule. Claire stayed behind the scenes, focused on weekly reports and restocking executive suites. She hadn't seen Julian since Wednesday night. No messages, no casual updates, but no tension either. It was as though both understood that the next step would happen at the right time and far from hotel corridors. Late that afternoon, Claire received a message more direct than anything he had ever sent her before. "Would like to see you outside the hotel this Saturday. Can I pick you up at 6:30 p.m.? Dinner? At my place. Just us. No improv this time." He signed it simply, Julian. Beneath it, one more line. No emojis, no punctuation beyond what was needed. "Let me know if that works." She didn't reply right away, but later that evening, while tidying up her own dinner dishes, she texted back, "I'll be ready at 6:30. At exactly 6:29 on Saturday, her intercom buzzed. When she stepped outside, his car was parked across the street. He was standing beside it, holding the passenger door open. No suit, just a dark shirt with sleeves rolled up and a modest smile. "Good evening." "Good evening." She got in and fastened her seatbelt calmly. The drive to his place took a little over 15 minutes. They chatted about the weather, how quiet the city felt on weekends, and a new bakery that had opened near the Central Market. When they arrived, he got out first and swiped a keycard to open the front entrance. His building sat on a quiet street in the Upper West Side with a well-maintained brick exterior, digital intercom, and a glass elevator in the front lobby. His apartment was on the 3rd floor at the far end of the hall, with large windows facing the cobblestone street. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, turning on the hallway light. The place was understated but warm. Open kitchen and living room, a light stone countertop dividing the space. Pendant lights above the dining table, a soft couch draped with a throw, built-in shelves with photography books, and 2 dark-framed prints hung evenly above the armchair. The air smelled of red wine, fresh herbs, and the slow heat of an oven still humming in the background. "Welcome," he said casually. "I thought you might have just ordered in." "I did, half of it. The rest I made myself. Wanted something personal in the evening." She smiled faintly and hung her coat on a chair. Dinner was already underway, but nothing felt staged. Everything suggested he'd prepared with intention, not extravagance but care. They ate from deep plates, with cloth napkins and small candles lit on the wooden table. He served pasta with roasted vegetables and a light herb sauce. Nothing fancy, but thoughtfully done. As they ate, the conversation shifted into new territory: family, childhood, professional missteps, and the unexpected paths that had led each of them to where they now stood. He shared how he had spent nearly 10 years in finance before switching to hospitality after a personal upheaval. She told him she had once considered culinary school, but couldn't afford the hands-on coursework. When the dishes were cleared, he asked if she wanted coffee. "I'd rather have more wine. Still some left." Julian pulled his chair back to the table, refilled their glasses, and rested his elbows gently on the surface. The conversation slowed, less structured now. They were two people letting their bodies decompress after days of quiet tension. When she stood to examine a couple of leaning frames, he watched her. "Still haven't decided which wall suits them best," he said. "Leave them there. It feels like you just moved in." "Me, in some ways I did, but some things don't change." She traced one of the frames lightly. "Have you always lived like this?" "Like what?" "Alone." "Not always, but mostly." She looked over her shoulder. "Same." When she sat down again, he didn't speak, let the silence settle. Then more softly, "I still want to kiss you, but this time, if you let me, I hope it won't stop halfway." She didn't respond aloud, but her body didn't retreat either. When he leaned forward, she moved her glass aside, clearing space between them. This kiss was longer, less cautious. His hands slid across her back, grounding her, their bodies aligned with ease and without urgency. As the night wore on, she stayed. She kicked off her shoes near the couch and pulled her hair up with the elastic she wore on her wrist. He dimmed the lights in the living room, leaving only a bedside lamp glowing in the bedroom. They slept together after their bodies had said everything they needed to. In the morning, she woke first. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood quietly, observing the stillness of his home. When he appeared, hair mussed and eyes not quite open, she smiled, this time without restraint. He stepped close, placed his hands on her waist, and said with simplicity, "I think I can finally say good morning." She set the glass down. "You can." And that Sunday began with everything that couldn't exist in a hotel hallway. On Monday morning, Claire entered the hotel through the side entrance, her uniform crisp and her hair pinned in a neat bun. She looked exactly as everyone was used to seeing her, but something had shifted, something not visible, not spoken. After Saturday night, after the wine in his living room, after the quiet way their bodies had come together, something inside her had settled. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't a promise. It was the calm certainty that Julian wasn't just the man at the top of the hierarchy. He was someone she was beginning to truly know. And for now, that was enough. The rhythm inside the hotel hadn't changed, not outwardly. No one would have guessed anything different by their voices, their posture, their interactions. But there were signals. Subtle, yes. But there. The way he assigned her specific tasks. The way his notes always ended with, "Let me know if you need time." These were not grand gestures, but they were real. On Wednesday, after a maintenance meeting, Julian passed Claire in the hallway and paused briefly, just long enough for them to be face to face without anyone else around. "Friday, 8 o'clock. My place. I'll handle dinner," he said with the calm tone of someone not trying to persuade. She gave a small nod. That was all they needed. They both knew what they were building. Thursday morning, before the shift began, she sent him a short message, "I'll bring the wine." He didn't respond. And that was its own reply. On Friday, she left work at exactly 6. Took her time getting ready at home, chose a soft knit sweater and dark pants, tucked the bottle of wine into a cloth bag, and headed out with steady steps. The taxi dropped her a block from his building. On the 3rd floor, the door was already ajar. She knocked once and stepped inside. Julian was in the kitchen shirtless, wearing a dark apron, slicing zucchini into thin rounds. "You're early," he said with a half smile. "Traffic helped, and so did I. Did you bring the wine? And an excuse to pull you out of the kitchen." He turned, dried his hands on the apron, and walked over. "Then let me watch you." She washed her hands and took over the cutting board. Together, they prepared a simple dish. roasted vegetables, seasoned rice, and melted cheese. They ate, sitting on the living room floor, backs against the couch, wine glasses in hand, bare feet stretched out. The conversation flowed effortlessly. She talked about growing up in Metz, her grandmother teaching her to make homemade pasta, and how those Sundays had shaped her. He shared stories from Geneva, the bad decisions that had distanced him from his family, and the peace he found when he realized he didn't have to please anyone anymore. Time slipped by. When the plates were cleared and the wine nearly gone, she crossed the room to the bookshelf, still disorganized. "Haven't sorted this out yet?" "I have. I just like remembering that not everything needs to be perfectly placed." He came up behind her, resting a hand gently at her waist. She turned to face him. "You don't have to convince me to stay tonight," she said. I like the sound of that." The bedroom was dark, save for the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Their bodies met with ease. The nervousness of their first night was gone. What remained was intimacy, growing, steady, becoming routine. They fell asleep together, limbs entwined from the start. In the morning, Claire woke before him. She stayed in bed for a few quiet minutes, then rose, went to the kitchen, boiled water, sliced bread. She moved silently, leaving the main light off. When she returned, Julian was still curled on his side, arms stretched across the pillow. She sat at the edge of the bed, letting those quiet pre-dawn moments settle. He opened his eyes slowly. Daylight slipped through the curtains. "I like having you here," he said, voice low. "I like being here." He sat up beside her, fingertips grazing the hem of her sweater. "Next weekend, I want to take you away, somewhere outside the city. We could leave Friday night, come back Sunday. What do you think?" "Sounds perfect. Just tell me what to pack by Thursday." "Deal." She finished preparing breakfast, setting 2 mugs on the counter. They stood in the kitchen, drinking in silence, not needing words to fill the air. Around 10, she slipped on her coat, picked up her bag, and he walked her to the door. The goodbye kiss was quiet, assured. They didn't set a date to see each other again before the trip, and neither of them minded. By Monday, the hotel returned to its usual pace. Claire arrived on time, uniform pressed, clipboard ready. Julian crossed the lobby mid-morning, gave a manager a quick direction, and took the elevator up. No glances, no missteps. But between them, since that Sunday, something new had settled in. Unspoken, but certain. Like everything that truly matters. The car moved steadily along the road, headlights cutting through the light mist that had started to form along the shoulder. It was Friday night, and the city was already behind them. Claire sat quietly, gazing out the side window at the darkening landscape, while Julian drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the gear shift. Her bag was in the trunk, along with a makeshift cooler he had packed, fruit and 2 bottles of water. The radio played softly, and the quiet in the car wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that exists between people who know they don't need words to be present. When they arrived at the inn, he parked in front of a restored old house with a wooden porch and small lights strung between the trees. Check-in was quick, and within minutes they were in a spacious room with double-paned windows, a tall bed, and an armchair facing a wooded hillside. She took off her coat, hung it by the door, and glanced around with a soft but genuine smile. He came up behind her, placed his hand lightly on her back and said, "Time moves however we want it to here." Saturday began with breakfast on the porch, under a wooden pergola covered in climbing vines. The table held buttermilk pancakes with maple syrup, scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, hash browns, a pitcher of orange juice, and a pot of freshly brewed coffee. Claire sat facing the garden, and Julian took the seat beside her. The setting was quiet, except for the gentle clinking of dishes in the background and the occasional bird song. There wasn't much talking. They didn't need it. Just being there was enough. They walked a light trail around the property and later had lunch at a small village restaurant. In the afternoon, they read from a book he'd brought, kissed long and slow, and laughed about things that only made sense between them. That night, they walked hand in hand to a tucked-away trattoria. He held the door for her, picked the wine, praised the meal, and talked about childhood memories. She told stories about sharing a room with her older sister, learning resilience through scarcity, and discovering her strengths through early work. When they returned to the inn, their fingers were still laced. Clothes came off slowly, and their bodies met without hesitation. The bed became a place where nothing more needed to be said. On Sunday, while she brushed her teeth and he packed their things, Claire's phone buzzed on the dresser. A message from a colleague. Not sure if it's true, but people are saying you and the GM were away together this weekend. It's been non-stop since Friday. She looked at the screen for a few seconds, said nothing, and walked to the window to put on her shoes. The trip's calm wasn't lost, but something had shifted. Julian noticed. Something wrong. I got a message. People at the hotel are talking about us. He was quiet for a moment, then gave a small nod. I'll take care of it. Mutter. On Monday, Claire arrived on time. The lobby looked unchanged, but the glances lingered. Someone from the restaurant whispered to a colleague as she passed. No one was overtly hostile, but something in the air was different. During lunch, she heard that someone in administration had seen a reservation in his name, and the rumor had spread to the supervisors. She said nothing. She finished her shift with her usual professionalism and went to the back office to complete the morning reports. Late in the day, a company-wide memo summoned supervisors and department heads to a meeting on the 8th floor. Most arrived on time, unaware of the reason. Julian entered last, clipboard in hand, no assistant, no entourage. He didn't sit. He stood at the front of the room, looked at everyone and spoke plainly. I don't usually get involved in personal gossip, but this time I need to be clear. A pause. I'm in a relationship with Claire. We are both adults. It's a personal matter and changes nothing about how this hotel is run or how any employee is evaluated. Some exchanged glances, but he continued. Claire has always been professional, capable, and discreet, and she still is. What won't be tolerated from this moment forward are jokes, comments, or insinuations about anyone's personal life. Not hers, not mine, not anyone's. He let the silence settle. If anyone has concerns, my door is open. Otherwise, let's get back to work. Thank you. He left with the same steady stride he'd entered. Word spread fast, but not like the rumors had. His tone, his stance, and his clarity changed the mood. No comments were heard afterward. Those who had whispered now simply got on with their day. Claire learned about the meeting second-hand. He didn't bring it up, but when they passed in the lobby later, he simply said, "Now we can get back to our lives." She gave a quiet smile. "That's all I want." And just like that, without speeches or grand declarations, she felt truly protected and deeply respected. Chapter 10. The decision and the commitment months had passed since that weekend getaway. Claire's daily routine at the Whitmore Grand hadn't slowed. She still climbed the service stairs with printouts in hand, still double-checked that the cleaning carts were properly stocked before noon, still coordinated shifts with the diligence of someone who knew that good work began before any guest ever arrived. What had changed was not visible, but it was deeply felt. She no longer left the hotel alone at the end of the day. Some evenings, Julian would be waiting across the street. No theatrics, no unnecessary gestures, just his quiet presence was enough. On others, they took separate routes, but always met back at home, where life had settled into a calm rhythm. They had moved in together at the end of April. It wasn't a grand decision, just something that happened naturally. She began sleeping over more often, and soon half the closet was hers, and her books filled the shelves where his used to lean alone. They talked it through over coffee, sitting side by side. It felt easy. A few weeks later, her hotel records listed a new address. No one said anything. Even those who used to gossip seemed to accept what they saw now. A well-adjusted couple, confident in themselves and in each other, who understood how to separate personal life from professional duty. In early September, Julian suggested a short trip, 3 days upstate, to a small inn near the Catskills. The place had an old brick exterior, a wooden porch that faced a lake, and a dining room that served freshly caught trout and locally grown vegetables. They left on a Friday afternoon, traveling light with only the essentials. The seasons were shifting. The wind had a crisp edge, the gravel paths were damp with fallen leaves, and the soft grey sky framed the weekend in something quiet and meaningful. On Saturday, they walked along the lake, watched sailboats glide through the water, and shared a glass of chilled wine under a canvas awning. That evening, back in their room, warmed by a small fireplace, she slipped off her boots and leaned against the headboard. The light was low, warm against the hardwood floor. Julian sat beside her, holding a small box and wearing a steady smile. He took her hand, looked into her eyes, and didn't circle around the words. "I want to marry you, Claire. I want to wake up next to you, share the days, the routines, the quiet mornings and messy nights. I have no doubt. You're the woman I want for every part of my life." She sat up fully, held the still-closed box and met his gaze. "I say yes, because I feel whole with you, and because I want all of it too, the days, the home, the future." He opened the box and gently slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a long embrace, his arms firm at her back, his cheek resting lightly against hers. "So it's official now. You're mine. I always was." On Sunday, they drove back to the city with the radio playing low and their fingers interlocked on the center console. The skyline came into view under golden light, the buildings glowing against the cool air. The apartment welcomed them just as they'd left it. Clean mugs on the counter, the blanket folded neatly on the couch, and fresh flowers still upright on the balcony. It was the same space. But now it marked the start of everything they were ready to build. Love can appear where you least expect it, if you're paying attention and brave enough to follow it. The end. Did you enjoy this story? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're watching from. See you next time.